back is going to, everybody is going to acknowledge that it changed everything. The way all of us look at work, whatever is next is not going to be how it was before. So, like you said, the government has to gear up for, another pandemic-like situation. So it's all forced us to think in a very different way, where our preparedness is going to be at a different level. But when we talk about that, we have to know that, okay, what is next? But having said that, I also feel that the impact was visible. So maybe tech was saved from a lot of perspectives, but the impact was visible across organization sectors. So Mehak was, also mentioning that automotive companies had to announce temporary salary reductions across levels. There were aviation industry had implemented also pay cuts. So mass layoffs in IT sector as well. And contractor engagements were the first to suffer because they were terminated to stay afloat, by a lot of organizations. So that was a challenge that came across. And I believe that the government of India, through its notifications, actually did try to rise up to the occasion by protecting, different businesses and also employer interests. So they did try to, respond to the evolving situation. So we remember that initially when the notifications had started coming in, it was like a complete stalling effort that, okay, there is nothing, nobody can move. And there was this joke that, keeping track of the COVID positive numbers was simpler than keeping track of the COVID notifications that were coming out by the center and the various state governments. So it was a strange situation. So, like I said, the government has tried to evolve, and that's why now in this 4.0, and the order, I mean, it's except for containment zones and maybe certain states like Maharashtra, which are badly impacted. I think it's pretty much been restricted only to containment zones, the lockdown orders. So that is a welcome relief to a lot of industries. And I just want to quickly touch upon, the key aspects where the government of India's notifications were touching upon. So they did recognize disruptions that were happening in performance of contractual obligations. Our previous panel was talking about it, and they provided relief by permitting invocation of force majeure, in that aspect, and exempting penalties if there was a non-performance. Then also the nationwide lockdown was being mandated by all these notifications, and without getting into the enforceability part of it. I mean, there were people out of their own fear and insecurities. It was implemented. So, and there were also the essential services aspect of it, which was notified so that it does not get disrupted. Then there has been a modification of the foreign direct investment policy to curb the opportunistic takeover of any sick industry or any acquisition of an Indian company that may be in distress by coming out with certain notifications regarding the countries which are next to our border. So they have made this also there. And I think a welcome relief was that during this entire COVID period, the government extended a lot of timelines of compliances, not just under Companies Act, but also under various labor laws and tax laws. So I think those notifications were also, a welcome relief, which at least made our lives simpler in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Thanks, Sudha. I think there were good insights from your side. Now I will go to the next session or section which we saw. I think here we like to speak a bit, keeping in mind that what lockdown has happened, the new normal is going to be there. How are you going to enhance business opportunities? So during this short-term measure, we saw a lot of amendments in labor reforms being done by the view states, relaxing the rules to enable business. And I think here, I believe the lead was taken by states like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, the southern states, Karnataka. I think all wanted to do it, and they were doing out changes law by ordinance and executive orders, because we have to keep in mind that labor is a concurrent subject under the constitution, and states can frame their own laws but require the approval. So we saw a lot of things happening in the BJP ruled states because they definitely get comfort from the center. And I think the need of the hour at this level to rationale to bring the change, in my case, would have been that to attract new investment and encourage industrial activity, we saw an opportunity coming where people abroad would not like to go to China or in the Southeast market or Vietnam, etc. Second would be to promote employment for the state workers who were going to other states. Something was also to, I will say, demand of industry for a long time to have labor reforms. And lastly, I think the revenues of states would have impacted because of such issues. So if you get new industries coming, definitely some amount of trickle down effect will come to the revenues of the state coffers. So that being so, I will now request Mehak if you can throw some light on what kind of important changes that you saw in the new amendments, starting with, say, bringing out relaxation on the trigger levels in terms of when a registration happen, increasing the employers' capability to increase the working hours, suspending the labor laws for, say, around 3 years period. So I think I would like Mehak to throw some light, given her practical impact, because she works on a pan-India level with so many aspects. So give a choice. Mehak, what's your views on this?
Yeah, in fact, this was something which, I think was already in the pipeline, because this, in any case, we were even pre-COVID, from a, fiscal and GDP standpoint, we were going through a phase where we needed investment in the country to sort of ramp up our GDP thresholds and our targets for this year. And I think COVID was probably just one of the excuses that just happened, and then that set the ball in motion for the states to come out with ordinances relaxing, labor laws. For example, UP came up with a notification. I mean, without going into the constitutionality of it, because of course that itself is debatable, like you said, because it falls under the concurrent risk, and the state itself decided to exclude certain provisions of important labor welfare legislation like Factories Act and other laws.
Yeah.
So of course they did all that, but I think the ultimate aim was, and they've been successful to an extent. The ultimate aim was to send out a message to the companies and the investors that the states are preparing to extend an olive branch, and they're prepared to make relaxations, whatever is within their control, to get the investment back and to get the confidence back, into manufacturing. So, especially in UP, I think they came out with that ordinance, and I believe within the next 2-3 weeks, they got a confirmation from Microsoft for setting up 1,000 people campus in Uttar Pradesh. And that's, a lot of relaxations they've given post that. There was a business survey, which was done, I believe, last week, and that has put UP into the top 5 business-oriented and business-friendly states. So all these things have definitely helped. Similarly, for Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and other states in Rajasthan, who took this as an opportunity to ramp up their, the issues that companies normally face, not just under labor legislations, but also under industrial policies, various subsidies that are there, the employment, restrictions which are there. Some of the states had a restriction that certain percentage of local workmen and employees had to be recruited from a particular state where the manufacturing facility is set up. So they gave relaxations on that under their, new industrial policies. So I believe, they took it as an opportunity to relook their industrial policies, since some of the southern states were already in the process of coming up with a new policy, and they made amendments to it, and some of the states gave specific exemptions, because it is important at this point in time from a business standpoint to get this kind of support to ramp up manufacturing, because that is a sector that is actually, that contributes a major part to the country's GDP. So it's important to, get it up to speed and get it out of the slumber.
Okay. Thanks, Mehak. While I think it's been a good gesture on part of these states to trigger such activity, because there would be a good, I will say, a chance for players who in the international market wanting to come out, or even other Indian entrepreneurs who want to start up any manufacturing or activities in such states. Would there be an issue in your view, or Sudha, you may pitch in also, that what would happen in terms of the balance between the rights of a industrial worker or a workman under the Industrial Disputes Acts or under the various social security legislations, which were in the Indian context were brought in only because there were a lot of abuse happening on the ground, and hence these acts were meant for that impact. While do you think that the periodicity of implementation of this amendment should have been restricted, and then we could have done something, because doing such a long-term thing may actually impact ground level activities? So what could be your thoughts on that?
I think it's a thin line, right, for the government to traverse on. So it's a very thin line to maintain the fine balance between the business interests and kickstarting the economy, and also looking into the social security and the labor rights. I think, which is what I think they've been trying to balance. I'm not too sure how successfully they've been able to do that, but at least there's some experimentation and intent around that, because we saw the finance minister during the COVID period take decisions regarding, ETF, take decisions regarding increasing the in-hand salary in the hand of the employees. They took decisions for the migrant workers to give them, subsidies, to give them cash, to dole out, food grains so that they could sustain themselves. So there were actions taken at the central level as well. And then, of course, there was, a need was felt from the business side, because eventually, if the business and an organization fall flats, it's going to have a percolating effect on the employees' livelihoods as well. So it was also important for them to, sort of take the concerns of the business into account. So I think maybe, they could have erred on either side, a little more or a little less, but they've, in my view, they've tried to at least show the intent, and at least tried to strike some sort of a fine balance. Of course, it's difficult. I mean, these are unprecedented times. It's difficult to sort of take, one side and completely, reverse the strategy to favor either the employees or the business, because eventually they're interconnected.
So, Sudha, before you speak, I would like to say one point, and I want your specific views on that. Do you think that it's time that the state and the central government come together with the industry stakeholders and looking at to simplify the labor laws, make compliance easier? Don't make it so stringent. Like you have this versus written records versus digital records. Then expediting approval. So if I have to start something, I require approval. And last, ensure consistency across states in terms of interpretation and application of labor law. I think none of the employers per se, I think the established players or the people who are going to come from the international space, going to come to do that, they definitely would like to be a compliant companies. But I think, do you think that the urge at the various corporate level is more to simplify the laws, make compliance easier, expediting the various approvals, and ensure consistency across all the states? Because you have one interpretation in one state, a different interpretation. I think, do you think that makes more sense in terms of these amendments?
I think absolutely, Shrivans, because India is known across the globe for its administrative delays and its bureaucracy and red tapeism. And I think we are one of those few countries where the number of labor laws have actually been intimidating. And this is first-hand experience. Whether it is compliance to labor laws, or it is all the number of forms that you have to sign in physical copies, where even e-signatures are questioned, where DocuSign validity is still, or other platforms, and the validity is still a big question mark. So it's very difficult. And in today's scenario, where it is global workforce, we have people who are in positions of authority across the globe. Somebody might be sitting in another part of the world and trying to, start up a business here. So unless we make it simpler for the person, one, first to understand that what are the asks, and like you said, to make it consistent across the country, it's going to be very difficult for us to actually, we can make a slogan of ease of doing business and digitization, making it simpler in India. But on the ground level, it's going to be really difficult to actually convince people to be back, to, actually invest and go ahead with these changes. So I completely agree with this. And I think it's a welcome step that at least the first step has happened. There will be a lot of detractors, there will be a lot of loopholes, and things that could have been done better, and that will be done better as we go along with time. But I think it's a major step in the right direction to actually start consolidating these laws, to be so that at least for the purpose of simplification, that people are able to at least understand. And from I think Mehak, or you were talking about that, whether actually the rights of the workers are going to be impacted. So from that perspective, I feel that we are actually getting into this collaborative approach even for reduction of salaries. And we were talking about any law that actually protects their salaries. It's only Industrial Disputes Act, which somewhere just touches upon it, that if there is a change of service where wages or change of time or change of workplace is also considered as a change of service, requires 21 days of prior notice, and the employee can say no. But this employee is only workman, which is covered under only, not supervisory administrative capacity, and earning less than 6,500. So we're talking about a very specific strata we're not actually empowering them, but, trying to hide behind that particular strata by saying that, no, these laws may impact. Like for UP, there was a lot of criticism that came about. So I think it's a double-edged sword.
Thanks, Sudha. Sachin, you are back. So we would like to, we touched the first two aspects of the Supreme Court and the High Court interpretations on the notification of MHA and the state orders and how it was forced. And secondly, we are looking at the proposed where the amendments happened in various states. We'd like to show some thoughts because we missed your thoughts during the session. So you can start with either of these two topics to take it forward.
So far that I was on to discussion on Supreme Court and High Court orders of Aurangabad, Nagpur bench and the Bombay bench. So my view was that only that what you all about the view that that was more towards that how we can mitigate in between the employer and employee. That mitigation was there, and that mitigation was seen in the Supreme Court order also later on. But somehow the practical difficulty which came up, that whether the question, which is very basic question, is whether this Disaster Management Act can override the Industrial Dispute Act or the labor issues. That is to be seen, and which is not been interfered, not been even discussed by any of the bench. Which has to be very clear. Seeing the Supreme Court or High Court jurisdiction, they have a jurisdiction to clearly say whether this law is overriding or not, which they have failed to do that, and because of that, there was a lot of confusion for entire these 2-3 months which was there. However, apart from that, which I also said, apart from that MHA jurisdiction, there were labor departments or labor ministry also issued some notifications to various in UP, Maharashtra, Delhi government itself says in the state government order only of disaster management. Anyone fails to do that, there will be a criminal action against them. That much level of means. The question is that whether we as an employer or a workman, you need to see a equality during the COVID-19 time. Plus, which you yourself said, there should be a basically a saving money which is to be kept in the account and to be distributed, which has not been given, which has not been done. It's all burden which is from putting up to the employer. Employer may not be having the money, he may be running on a losses. How we'll manage that? That's a concern, and because of that, a lot of industries have gone to the closure also. You see the situation, a lot of industries have gone to the closure. Myself in media, even if there was an exemption for me in media for entire this COVID-19, the industry level of circulation has gone down, advertisement has gone down to a level which you can't believe that. Not only the print or radio. So when the money is not there, how can you rotate the money and how it works, and what is the pocket size of the promoter that is to be looked into, or a shareholder that is to be looked into? That was the issue which I personally feel. Apart from
just what the second aspect of what you see about the amendments that has been done recently to change the labor laws for a few months and years, so that there is an impetus to business in these states of, say, I will say Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Karnataka. They all started bringing.
So they all started. UP started, Madhya Pradesh started, but UP said that there is liberalization of working hours to be continued to 72 hours. With that, no labor law will be applicable for a couple of 3 years. The years they have decided. The question, very basic question of all laws is that what is that? This labor law is a state law or a concurrent law? It should be a concurrent list first, and it should be decided by the president only. Then it can be changed. That's the basic concern which is there. Everyone came forward, but if you see, except MP or a Gujarat, then no one has taken forward. UP has gone down.
So I think what we discussed, and I put that query to Sudha also. I think time is not about changing the law drastically. It's only to ensure that the law are made in such a manner that there is a balancing act that is done, which enables all the corporates across India to have, I would say, is a very, very clear, ease of compliance. There is consistency across, and there are approvals in time. I think that is more important than looking at reducing other stuff. So I think with that view, I will move to the next important topic of discussion, which we thought is, when the Modi government came, they wanted to look at one of the manifestos of them was to consolidate and simplify the labor laws. And I think they had gone in the step by codifying all the various fragrant laws and brought it under 4 codes. The first was the code on wages. The second was the occupational safety, health and working conditions code 2019. Then you had the code on social security 2019. And lastly was the industrial relations code of 2019. Few of them has been kicked off. So I would now bring the query back to Mehak and say, what do you think would be the impact of such codifications, simplifying these laws, as well as what impact you see as impetus or growth to the businesses in these times?
Yeah, so I think it's a good move to go towards codification for sure, because for one, we have multiple laws, and we have multiple notifications under those laws, and it's those laws are, quite obsolete, some of them, and quite archaic, and not, some of them have not changed with time. So definitely, the move to have a consolidated code on wages, the code on occupational safety, the industrial relations code, and the social security code is absolutely welcome. However, I have three main comments in this. Firstly, that these laws are being codified to reduce the burden of compliance, to clarify the positions that, different states could take, to, consolidate the position on minimum wages, for example. That is what the Code of Wages plans to do. It needs to fix a consolidated and a common floor wage for the entire country. So all of these four codes, in a similar manner, plan to have a common ground under the prevailing labor laws, which run, I don't know, which are maybe in 40s or 50s. So they plan to consolidate all of these laws. So it is important that it's not just a paper codification and consolidation, but it genuinely, in practicality, also reduces the burden of compliance for companies and workmen and employees, both the sectors. That is one. The other thing is that, from the perspective of clarity, and it is very important that these coded laws do not go in the direction in which GST went, where the law came first and then came the intent, and then thirdly came out the clarifications and the process. So, it's important that the process and the rules and the framework around it is decided and agreed by all the stakeholders before it is eventually, executed, which I think is what the government is right now working on, because they had notified the Code on Wages Act, and they've not yet come out with the rules because those are still under discussion. I think it's important to discuss the way practically the rules and the processes are going to work before they actually execute it one fine day. So that is the second comment that I have. The third comment that I have is from a business standpoint, that in addition, of course, it's needless to say that codification of all of these laws, if done in a proper and planned manner, would and is intended to reduce the ambiguities and the compliance burden on the companies as well as the workers and employees, and to put our country on speed on the labor reforms, as we've agreed with ILO, and we are bound by that as well. But the other side to it is that it's not just these reforms in isolation that are going to help the business sector. So from an FDI standpoint, or from any companies, from an Indian company standpoint, it's not just important that the labor laws are dealt with and consolidated. It's also important for the government to look at other laws and look at other burdens in this COVID context, especially, and in the context of the lower GDP, to see how best they can remove the other issues and the other hindrances that are there for companies. I mean, for example, I was going through this particular survey, which is the World Bank Enterprise Survey of 2014, where about 9,281 companies participated. And there, the labor hindrances were fourth or fifth in the list, after issues of red tapeism, power and electricity rates, and tax issues. So it's also important for the government to look into all of these issues consolidatingly and in a cohesive manner, if they want to actually have a bigger impact on the ground.
Thanks, Mehak. Sachin, your views on the new codifications which have just happened, the process of bringing it on the four courts. I think we have lost him. So Sudha, till that time, till he joins, what are your views? Do you see it's a pro step, and more so from a tech and IT world, do you think this is going to make better things?
No, definitely, Shivas. So this is likely, to be seen as one of the most important policy decisions that the government is taking during its term, because it has the potential to impact more than 500 million workers across the industry, right? And it has been a long-standing agenda of the government to codify and also consolidate labor laws to promote ease of doing business in India.
Yeah.
And hopefully, this step is going to increase our ranking in the World Bank of ease of doing business, so that globally our standing will improve, hopefully. So as of now, I mean, before this is implemented, we have almost like 45 federal laws and more than 100 state laws. So the magnitude of these laws itself is inundating, where first to understand and then to comply becomes a challenge itself, right? So I think from that perspective, to consolidate these into four major laws is a very important aspect. And some of these draft codes have been discussed, and they have been been talked about in the last several years, including the previous governments also spoke about it. But now at least it has been put to the parliament and it has been approved. So I think that's a good thing. So several benefits that I see in codification of these laws is that it will remove the multiplicity that we were talking about, across states that you were saying of definitions. That what do I have to do, say if I go to Karnataka, say vis-a-vis Maharashtra. So I think that is going to be a good thing without compromising on the basic benefits, because it's going to bring a streamlining of the basic benefits for employee welfare and benefits. And it would also make it easier for the employers to understand. And if they understand, then to comply, and also for the labor authorities to enforce the laws. So I find this, that it's not just the organizations, but also probably sometimes the enforcement is so poor. Because I myself in my organization have seen that the question is that, okay, for non-compliance, what is the fine? And it is some outdated, some 1,000 rupees or some 50 rupees that is there, where it is very easy to just overlook and just move past what is being asked by the law. And I think another welcome step from my perspective that I feel is that encouraging digitization. Because in today's tech world, if you do a web-based inspection, doing away with all these paper records and replacing with electronic records is going to be a major plus. So calling for information electronically for inspection, composition of offences, so all of these kind of things. So I think COVID has also given an impetus across industries to move from paper to digital records. And here also in this consolidation, I think that's a welcome step that has been taken, which is a model for in ministries. Even when it comes to enforcement, it's going to be simply easier. And this compliance will also hopefully promote a lot more enterprises to set up and create, which will create employment opportunities if they set up their industries here in India. And like I said, hopefully with the next World Bank survey, if our ranking goes up, I think the reputation that I was talking about across the globe of India being the most difficult place, and there's a complex web of these labor laws that one has to comply with, that's going to ease out.
Great. I think what you touched upon two important aspects in real estate industry. RERA as a act came and there was a regulator in the sector. I must say the Maharashtra model started with the MahaRERA. I must appreciate and share that they have got a full digital from day one to get an application for a registration of a project digitalized. You didn't have a personal interaction with anybody. All the records of a project had to be uploaded for the public to see from web domain. You don't have to go to a promoter's office or a developer or real estate builder's office to see the papers. All the basic documents were online, and that was across the projects. So that was one. What you said has already been implemented, and the entire thing, except in complaint mechanism, also the only hearing was happening offline, which in this COVID has become fully on web mode domain. So I think one aspect has been presented by one authority, and it takes only time because, and I must appreciate they took the services of a big four agency to put the entire process in place. So if there is a will, definitely I think implementation can happen. So with these comments, Sachin, we have a bit short of time, but we'll go to the next topic, which is also very important, is work from home is going to become a new normal. And here, I believe that there are two issues that are going to happen. The first issue is from an HR and a labor law perspective, and the second is from a legal perspective of policies, legal issues on data breaches, etc. So let's take the first aspect. What is the thought process of the team or of the panel in terms of what will happen and how the HR department is going to look at your marking presence in office in terms of minimum hours of work? Do you think a software should be in place by all entities to look at office logins? Secondly, how do you calculate the casual leave and privilege leave? Because frankly speaking, smaller leaves which you used to take earlier are now not required, primarily because you are at home, other things are not required. And secondly, is there the work hours now earlier used to be limited to a physical time in office or later on to your WhatsApp and your emails or mobile, but now I think it has become 24/7. So these are one set things where people are looking at whether HR in every org has to come in and ensure some sanity. Lastly, we are seeing a diverse thing. Some employers coming and saying, giving enabling infrastructure to the employees to work from home in terms of a laptop, a table, a Wi-Fi connection. And there are other companies who are not able to manage to the basic things and hence going for pay cuts. So I think in a very vibrant and a large spectrum of corporates, what are the third process on these? And I will start with Sudha to kickstart this discussion.
So I think that's a very pertinent question, Shrivals, that whether working from home is going to be the new normal, especially now that the restrictions are being lifted. Are organizations actually changing their work from home plans for their employees, or they have got so used to it in the comfort zone where the employees themselves also have, started realizing that if it can work this way, why go back? But just before our panel started, like all of us were discussing, it has its own challenges, right? But I will just go into a research by a consulting firm which had presented its data that 1 in 3 organizations sees remote work as a norm at least for next 3 years. So it may not be like for next 15 years, or things might change in today's flexible and fluid environment. But definitely for next 3 years, most of the employers are exploring whether they can make home office a mainstay for some of their employees at least, and also creating job employment offers which are either completely work from home or at least have a flexi tone to it. And while the offices will remain open, because there are industries where it's not possible to not have access to office, even for tech, for data centers, and for other reasons. So having offices remain for limited access. So
the back-end operations definitely can.
Yeah, so a lot of organizations are, actually letting the employees continue to work from home and opting for a blended or a hybrid model where on need basis, they may access office. It may be on rotation basis, or it may be, on a certain percentage of the workforce which is required to access office. So, but there is no denying that, COVID-19 has accelerated the transition, which is something that I think, before this whole pandemic struck us, a lot of us had this wishful thinking. I wish I could just continue to work from home. I wish I could, have this option of working from home. And now people are also getting tired of this whole thing. But there are companies like Google, Twitter, Square, who have given their employees the option to work from home on a permanent basis, right? And other industries will also have to adapt. And while everyone is actually happy with this arrangement, at least in the short run, it seems so because it gives them business continuity, the conflicts between the employer and employee will arise in the long run because there are no laws in India which govern work from home. And there are some countries which have specific laws that support work from home, but India in the current state is far from having any legally endorsing laws that actually endorse this new normal. So for example, in Philippines, employers are required to develop a telecommuting program that incorporates work hours, alternative workplaces, cost of equipment, occupational safety and health related benefits, and also data privacy norms while working from home. And the employer is also required to ensure that the telecommuting employees are given the same benefit as the employees who are working from office. And I just want to quickly give one example here, because in Switzerland they took a step further, and their top court had actually ruled that in case an employer asks an employee to work from home, they have to contribute in a part of their rent, because they're saving on real estate cost. So even if this was not actually mandated as part of an agreement between the employer and the employee before this arrangement started, that's not of any consequence. Or even if the employee did not have to invest in a larger office or take up more space to enable him or her working from home, even then it was ruled that the employer should be paying a part of their rent. So I think it's only a matter of time before employees elsewhere start demanding that if their employers are saving on real estate costs due to work from home, then they should pass on some benefits and pay a share of the rent to the work from home employees as well. So I will just take a step back before I get into actual pluses and the flip sides of from employees' perspective of this whole arrangement.
So, Mac, I would like now you to throw some lights on the fact where what is the HR view, or from a labor law perspective, how you look at various compliances in the absence? If like, how do you in various offices look at measurement of their employees logging in, whether they are doing it or not? I think definitely, as Sudha said, manufacturing cannot happen online. Certain things which are more, I will say, documenting or back transactions can always happen this manner. but the actual physical work needs to happen. So it's the automobile industry, manufacturing processes will definitely require that. I think there will be a very good balance between people who are sitting in corporate offices per se versus who are doing action on the lines or assembly lines will make a difference. I think that is going to have a big impact. So what do you think the new norm will create for HR department in terms of compliances from a labor law perspective?
Yeah, in fact, that's a very important question because for especially for a manufacturing setup, because for corporate offices, of course, companies have rightly allowed work from home, and the employees are working from home. Each company has come up with a different manner of sort of ensuring that the employees are working round the clock. Some have started online attendance portals, some have started time sheets, some have also started Skype logins on the number of hours you're logged in, so on and so forth. So that's an HR policy that depends from company to company. However, as you rightly said, that this is something that cannot be replicated for factories and manufacturing plants. So there, of course, keeping into account the Ministry of Health guidelines, the manufacturing setups need to keep running. So definitely the employees and the workmen, they need to work, but of course they need to work with the social distancing requirements, with the you know absolute hygiene, sanitization, and the requirement to have lesser production lines to reduce the number of people, to have shifts 2 or 3 times a day. So all those adjustments, being a manufacturing setup, we've also had to do. Of course, at the same time, ensuring the health of the employees and workmen, because that is primary. So that is something, that's the call that the HR team had to take, and the call had to be taken sooner rather than later, because the manufacturing couldn't stop, especially for an essential services sector. The manufacturing plants had to keep going. The approvals need to be taken on time from the state authorities. The employees and the workmen need to be informed on time, which they were, and then the entire infrastructure and paraphernalia for the way they're going to be sitting, the way they're going to be working inside the factory, the kind of distance they would be maintaining, the encircling of where they would be standing. So all these practical aspects also had to be taken into account, which I think a lot of HR teams did. So that's so far on that front. The other point that I feel that became extremely crucial in a work from home scenario, irrespective of the sector the sector of business, was the data privacy issues, because of the dependency on technology and the dependency on the fact that a lot of companies did not have their internal softwares or logins that the employees were working on. In fact, they did not even have basic firewall protections, or basic protections on the hard disk and the server data that the employees had access to, and there was no time to make all of these changes on either the laptop or the server, or to sort of restrict access of something which is confidential to the employees. So a lot of companies had to think on their feet, and which they did, and they came up with privacy consents and privacy declarations and privacy notices. These are just nomenclatures, but essentially these were the documents that a lot of companies got signed from their employees to ensure that every sort of data that the employee had access to or would get access to, whether it's through recording the online meetings, or whether it's through the internal servers, or whether it's through the need of the hour to exchange everything over Skype and other chat forums. It was important that all of that data was protected, and there was enough data privacy, at least on the level of the HR, to be able to tomorrow protect or sort of ring fence the entire data that the company has had to give access to the employees, because it's been a massive change.
So I think I will also put one reverse logic question, is that while few employees had their official laptops with them, there were cases where employees were using their own private devices, and there they were giving access to the employees, and there's always a chance of a reverse access to the privacy or the data on the laptops of the employees. And second issue is they are utilizing their personal assets. How do they put in place the firewalls, etc.? And I think it's going to be a great challenge. But I think the privacy norms in terms of how you tweak your office policies across, whether it's for data breaches or for confidentiality, privacy, in terms of doing, would have to take a lot of change. And I think the interesting aspect which I felt across happening is now that the definition of workplace would extend it in a policy for, I will say, prevention of sexual harassment post will also get expanded. Have people done those things, changes required? Because there's going to be a lot of exchange over WhatsApp, emails, etc., which would require it. What was an interaction, office corridor, or I will say a tea break, would now become offline chats. So that also expands the definition of that. So I think a lot of work is required to be done with the legal team. So any challenges on that aspect which you saw in your, and I would like thereafter Sudha to also respond on that.
Yeah, I think, of course, I mean, there were challenges because it's a double-edged sword. Because on one hand, it's the company, the employer, and the HR team that is telling the employees, that the productivity shouldn't reduce, and the work needs to keep coming in, whether it's through the official laptop or personal laptop or phones, and they will get the configurations going for all of that. And on the other hand, it's also important for the company to secure the data and to keep the privacy and confidentiality of it going. So of course, from a documentation perspective, the legal team was involved in taking all of these consents and approval. But even from a cultural and a mind shift perspective, it was important that the HR team educated all the employees and told them why something was being done, because it was being done, because it was important that where the entire it's a mind shift. Because as you know, in India, work from home, it wasn't a culture that we as an industry or as an employment class was used to. So it was only there for a few companies initially, IT companies to start with. So it was important for everybody to have a mind shift to have the awareness that they need to be careful while dealing with the company's data and sensitive information, because it's not just the company information, it could be their information also at stake, their personal information, which is being which could be shared with other vendors and consultants. And it was also important for the company to understand that, of course, the documents could be rolled out overnight and declarations and consents could be taken, but the change in culture would take some time. And over the last 6 months, even I've seen a massive change. Also, I think companies really had to think out of the box, because like I said during the beginning of the session, that companies had to focus on reducing their costs and everything. One of the reasons was that they had to reduce the various channels where the information was going out. So for one job, earlier 4 or 5 vendors would be considered, and there would be proper tenders, and there would be 5 set of NDAs and data protection agreements that were signed. Now companies are also aware that they need to reduce that. Similarly, if they focus on one channel from where their work can be done. For example, if the manufacturing entity today needs about 200 odd trainees, instead of evaluating 4 staffing agencies, they can probably just get hold of a NEEM agency, which is National Employability Enhancement Mission, and these are the agencies which are certified by the government. And they can just get hold of them. They can provide the trainees, and the entire set of confidentiality, business information, business plans, everything is just all that sharing is just restricted to one level. And being a government sort of approved agency, there is a lot more sanctity to it. So the companies are thinking about different ways. They are thinking out of the box, because that is the need of the hour.
Sudha, your thoughts on how these were happening? I think we are rushing against time. We would definitely like to close.
Do a very capsule, but I want to put the employee's perspective here, since it is an employer-employee relationships that have emerged in this COVID-19 lockdown time. So I think from an employee's perspective, the whole flexibility of being able to work from home has saved on their commute time, has limited their exposure to being infected. They can take care of their home requirements. It's closer to the real life scenario, where actually due to lockdown, kids may be working from home. Sometimes for long periods, domestic help is not available. Also, sometimes essential services are impacted for a lockdown because of the lockdown, right? So flexibility of location is another thing, which employees can work from anywhere as long as they have good connectivity and they have the IT assets available. there is no dependency to be available in a particular city or state, which is again a challenge as well for the employers. But for employees, it gives immense freedom of movement, and also it's a respite to those employees who probably got stuck, in various locations because of travel restrictions. So I think it enabled them. It was because initially there was this whole question whether there should be forced leave that should be imposed on these employees who don't have IT assets. But I think organizations were innovative, where at least in the IT sector, these employees who were stuck in these locations without any assets, without any laptops, were given allowances, one-time allowances to buy the machines to be able to get back online. And then, of course, from employees' perspective, I think the concern has not just been psychological, but it's also like financial. Whether the hospitalization is going to be covered as part of insurance. Is it only when they're hospitalized, or also if home quarantine or teleconsulting is happening with the doctor? Will that be covered? And like we were talking about, this aspect a little time ago, that this whole flexibility has also brought in an aspect where the line between work and work for home and work for office has blurred. So work-life balance has definitely been impacted due to the stretched work hours. Since we are available at home, there is no weekend concept, and there is actually the timing of okay, it's 9 to 6. The regular work hours are 9 to 6 is not actually followed, because the lunch hour might go from 1 to 3, depending on when my son probably has a lunch break or when the other requirements are there. And then I don't mind putting in extra hours. So there has been this blurring of lines that has happened. In terms of leaves, even if an employee has availed for sick leave, because the access is there, you are available, it's not really sacrosanct. You might be asked to log in for critical tasks even if you're on sick leave. Leave encashment is in a question. So earned leave, employees have not been able to take because there is nowhere to go. There are travel restrictions, and because of the fear of travel. So various reasons. But leave encashment, because not many employees have been able to take, a lot of companies are reconsidering whether they should make it lapse or they should actually encash. Then insurance aspect we already talked about. But from the employer's perspective, I want to just quickly touch upon that many organizations have actually been forced upon. So I was talking about the IT sector, but many organizations have been forced upon to close their establishments as part of the containment measures, and also, like Mehak said, to rethink of designing the office spaces to maintain the standard social distancing norms, which I think is a plus. And also, they have had to chip into areas which were not normal before, such as arranging for accommodation for employees who are coming back from their hometowns, who probably are having problems, revising the broadband and internet reimbursement policies, which probably earlier were only, permitted for employees who require to log in from home. Then, like I mentioned, supporting the home infrastructure to enable work from home, whether it is table, chair, or whatever it might be. Yes.
So, Sudha, I need to interject because I will require Sachin to give his last thoughts on the issue of employee issues and work from home. Very brief, Sachin, the last lines on the subject.
So before employee issue, this is a big issue of digitalization, and that's the telecom internet problem I am also facing right now. That's the problem. This basic issue for the employment is this. Basically, for employee working from home, it's always a pleasure to be work from home, and everyone was looking for that only every time. When I will get this job of IT, and I will also able to work from home. That was the concerned mindset of every Indian person also. But seeing the scenario, last couple of months, since the person can't go out, the number of hours, which Sudha also said, working stretch has gone high, work schedule has gone bigger, right? I said productivity has gone high. Plus, a lot of projects which have come up with the companies, every company is looking into digitalization. All sets of, even the sales has gone to digitalization mode. So that's all e-com mode is coming up. So that's what the employment issue is coming up. Employees may face issues of leaves, which are basic issues, which we feel also. Employee may face that sickness, basically, which we think of mind sickness, because you can't go anywhere outside. That's a big issue for the employee. That 24/7 he's on the laptop and sitting on the work. And when you're free, you say what to do. Better to work on something. This is what everyone is facing right now. And I personally feel this problem will continue for a couple of months. Hope we all come out of this. But every company has given this three-way topic to one, the necessity of person who need to be in office, one who can be rotational, and one who can 100% go and work from home only. The three categories of working structure which is there. And this will follow for long, and may possible that coming era will say that more work from home, and people will get rent in India also for the which we would look into. The Mehak talked about the rental to be paid by the companies for the employees soon.
So thanks. I think at this juncture, I need to wind up the session because we already rolled over a time. Thanks to all the panelists for giving their broad insights on the subject. This is a never-ending topic, but I think definitely there will be more norms to do. Thanks to Legal Era for giving us this opportunity to speak on the subject. And with that thoughts, I thank all the participants who listened to us with our discussion.